President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed 3 new laws now for South Africa, which look at housing, consumer protection, the development of agriculture, as well as pollution from ships. Ramaphosa has signed several new laws over the last year, with many drawing the ire of other political parties. And last week, Ramaphosa signed the Expropriation Bill into law, which allows the state to, under certain circumstances, expropriate land for public interest. Now, the signing of the bill led to angered response from the Democratic Alliance, which is the second largest party within the government of national unity structure. Political analyst Dr Metji Makgoba joins us now to further unpack the political aspects of these new signed bills. Doctor, we really appreciate your time with us today. Welcome. So firstly, and I think very importantly, let's get your understanding of the recently signed bills, as well as their overall impact on the current governing structures, but also in society at large. Let's start with the Housing Consumer Protection Bill first.
I think the housing space has been predominantly dominated by white capital, and I think the issue has been that there has been the inflation of prices across the country in terms of how houses are sold and how people get scammed in those spaces. And I think the bill sort of tries to formalize the space in terms of trying to close up the loopholes in terms of protecting consumers, because when you're buying a house and you sort of don't understand the nitty-gritties of the space, you can easily lose money or get scammed. And I think the bill is geared to addressing such an issue.
Let's talk about the other ones, Doctor. I mean, it's not just that one only. I mentioned there the other ones talking about the impact not only to the current governing structures, but how do they impact on society at large?
I think the bills that you are mentioning are just so specific, and I think given the issues of land in South Africa, they tend to be so superficial, because the current problems of housing and land that we have in South Africa cannot be resolved through legislation. Legislation, if anything they do, is to actually depoliticize some of these issues, because main issue in South Africa is the main issue of land ownership. If the issue of land ownership is not resolved at a political level, any legislation that is going to be passed or enacted is just going to be for compliance reason. And what does that is that you end up creating things such as managerial practice, such as scoreboards, compliance issues, whereas the social issue that led to the creation of the bill, it's not been addressed. So when we deal with the issues of land in South Africa, the issue is that what are the ownership patterns of land in South Africa? How does that affect housing? And what is it that the state can do to resolve the issue? But what we have seen in the past is that since the state or the government is operating within the constraints of neoliberalism, what they can do is to sort of manage the problems rather than resolving the core of the problem. And I think these bills, what they do is that because they have nothing to do with the fundamental issue of land that we have in South Africa.
Very interesting indeed, Doctor. So what do you make then of the current divide or rift that some of these bills have actually now created within society? And I'm asking this, Doctor, because firstly, these bills are serious legal jargon and business jargon, and very difficult for the layman to really understand its direct implications, especially on individuals, leading to people really taking wrong information that is driven as public narrative on media platforms.
Let's look at the Appropriation Bill, for instance. I think the fight between the DA and the ANC, it's a superficial fight, because what the DA has been doing since having power in South Africa in terms of having access to challenge the ANC as an official opposition, they've been taking on the ANC on policies that are even tokenistic, policies that are about window dressing, and the DA will fight the ANC. So what the DA is doing right now is that it's governed by white fears, and the ANC has allowed the DA to entrench white fears in the governance structures of South Africa. Because if you take the land bill, for instance, it has nothing to do with land redistribution. It actually empowers the state to expropriate the land under certain circumstances. But how the ANC has positioned the issue is as if now we are dealing with the transformation of land ownership patterns in South Africa, which is not true, because this is a specific bill that deals with only how the state can expropriate land for public use and for public interest, and that is only in conversation with the Section 25 of the Constitution, and that section is the one that actually has created problems for the ANC in the past, and how they are positioning this bill as transformative is something that is bizarre, because the bill has nothing to do with ordinary people in the street, and the DA sort of capitalizes that to further create more confusion, as if the ANC is involved in some transformative project, and now the DA is trying to stop the ANC, whereas in the end, the two parties are just creating confusions over nothing.
Very interesting, Doctor. And then this leads to losing key components of the actual bill by the wider society, because they're busy now fighting on the so-called riffraff between the two parties where they mainly disagree. So you have heard, Doctor, that the RAND has also reacted somehow to the signature of some of these bills. Normally, for the benefit of our viewers, the process to pass these bills, we know there's often calls for national input, public participation. And what is puzzling is that we are never privy to those suggestions and how then the final draft was approved. Should government not be looking at doing this differently in order to limit public as well as political opposition when they are indeed passed?
I think here we're dealing with a sensitive political issue which is at the center of equality in South Africa. So firstly, the ANC lies about the potential impact of the bill, which is all about transforming. And when you talk about transformation in South Africa, people expect that now you are dealing with the transformation of land ownership patterns in South Africa, which is at the center of mining, agriculture, and other sectors. But that's not what the bill is doing. So the ANC was trying to use this bill to capitalize, to score some cheap political points. And the DA is now entering the terrain to continue the lie that was started by the ANC, which is trying to project this bill as transformative. And in the end, people are sort of going to have hopes that the appropriation bill is going to resolve land inequality in South Africa, whereas this is actually a small micro issue which empowers the state to expropriate land for public interest and for public use. And it has nothing to do directly with poor people in villages, poor people in townships, and poor people in cities that are landless. And the impression that has been projected by the ANC is as if now we've entered the terrain of radical transformation, in which the appropriation bill is going to set us on stage for that.
And ordinarily, and in closing, Doctor, can one say then, can an implementing authority or entity, which is of course the ministry in this instance, then come out on against its own government or principle, vowing to not effect the bill as directed? And is that not then a direct defiance of the state?
Yeah, it's directly a defiance especially of the president, because the president is the one who appoints a minister. And if now the minister says, I'm not going to implement the bill, it means now the onus is on the president to fire the minister in point, because the confusion is even getting worse, because even the discussion that we're having in South Africa, it's quite even, it's just like a sand in the eyes, because we have a serious problem of land ownership, which requires the state to take a decision to resolve the land ownership pattern so that people can have access to land for different reasons. And the ANC is not doing that. And however, in not doing that, they are acting as if that is the direction they are taking, while they are not. And the DA, seeing that the ANC is actually dropped the ball, they are even making edits the ANC is winning, and they are doing something more important to further confuse people in the street. And I think this is what they've been doing for quite some time. Let's take, for instance, with policies such as BEE. BEE has not done anything to transform this economy, but the DA has always been on the ANC's case that BEE is creating is actually reverse racism. And that has been the political strategy that has been used by the DA. Unfortunately, it's working, because they get to create all these confusions, and people end up not knowing now, for instance, that the appropriation bill actually has nothing to do with land justice in South Africa.
Nicely put, Doctor. Thank you so much for your input this afternoon. That is Dr. Metji Makgoba there. He's a political analyst on the recently signed bills in the country.